من أي ناحية؟
في عندهم برنامج هكذا محاضرة أو
last week, it was last Saturday.
was.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. يا شيخ يونس can you please keep quiet because I'm going to talk. Okay, thank you. شيخ يونس البلالي يعمل مشاكل. Aurangzeb, صح? Alhamdulillah, today we're with Dr. Iftikhar Hussein, who's a teacher at one of the local schools here, and he's been involved in the various forms of the Islamic movement in the UK since, I believe, the late 80s, correct?
No,
early 90s. Inshallah. So today he's going to, inshallah, take us on a little journey with one of the most important characters as far as Islam in the Indian subcontinent is concerned, inshallah. And I'll allow Sheikh Dr. Iftikhar to introduce Aurangzeb to you, inshallah, and to inshallah enlighten us with the story, inshallah. So, before we start again, if you haven't done so already, like our page on Facebook, MABFriday, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, MABFridays. Fridays plural form on YouTube, and on Facebook, singular form, one word on Facebook.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihil ameen, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barik wa sallim. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. My respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Mashallah, I always get to talk about some of the influential people from the Indian subcontinent. So before I gave a talk on Allama Iqbal, I've given a talk on Maulana Maududi here and on Shah Waliullah Dehlvi. But today we are talking about someone who was a king yet a pauper. And Allama Iqbal rahimahullah says about revival in India and on the preservation of Islam in India. And he says, if it was not for three personalities, Islam would not exist in India. One was Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi, who basically stood against the Mughal Emperor Akbar. The other one was the great revivalist Shah Waliullah Dehlvi, who was born, I think, 2 or 3 years after the death of Aurangzeb. And the third is Aurangzeb himself. And I want to say a few things about what the great poet Allama Iqbal said about Aurangzeb, and then I'll go into the talk of who he was. He said, Alamgir was the king of heavenly abode. He was the glory of the Temaruds, because that's where they are coming from. He's saying, to him is due the respect paid to Muslims and to the Prophet's law. Aurangzeb is regarded as the first person and probably the only person to implement Sharia in a country that was majority non-Muslim. So when the people say that Hanafi fiqh or the Hanafi madhab is the only madhab that was implemented as a law, then they are right, because this is what Alamgir did. He implemented the Hanafi law, and we will go into this. And when he implemented it, the Turks of the Ottoman Empire followed suit, and they actually took from him and they implemented it in Turkey under them as well. He says that Akbar was the Ibrahim of his time. That just as Ibrahim alayhi salam fought idol worship in his time, Alamgir did the same thing. Sorry, Alamgir, not Akbar. Alamgir was the reviver of this faith. His luminous sword illuminated our company, and he unseated the kufr that had existed in the time of Akbar and then Jahangir after that. So Alamgir is what we regard as the sixth great Mughal emperor. So when I mean Mughal emperor, the great Mughal emperor, it means that these were the 6 emperors who actually India flourished under them. So the Mughals or the Mughal dynasty started in India when Babur came from central Russian states. He came, he conquered Kabul in 1526, and then he moved towards Delhi, and he captured Delhi and established the Mughal rule in Delhi, which stayed till from 1526 till about 1856, when the last Mughal emperor Shah Bahadur Shah Zafar II was exiled by the British in Burma. And after Babur, his son ascended, Humayun, a very pious man but very weak ruler. Humayun died, and his son Akbar, who probably is the most famous of the Mughal emperors, who reigned for approximately 50 years. There are 3 people who have ruled India for 50 years. Akbar, Alamgir, and Queen Victoria. These are the 3 people who ruled India for 50 years. After Akbar came Jahangir, and then his son Shah Jahan, and then his son Aurangzeb, who was the 4th son of Shah Jahan. So let's look at him and see a bit about his life. He is Muhammad Abu al-Muzaffar Muhyiddin Muhammad Aurangzeb Alamgir. This is what he's known as. He's known as Alamgir because this is Farsi, it's Persian for meaning the conqueror of the world. He is known as Alamgir he's known as Aurangzeb because he's the owner of ornaments. These were the titles that were given by people at that time, and every Mughal king had a title given. And then the Muslim scholars and the pious Muslims, they called him Muhyiddin, as the reviver, as the preserver of the deen in the subcontinent. His personality truly is a wonderful personality, and we will see his personality. He is a righteous king. He is master of poetry. He is a military ruler, he is a warrior, and he is a wonderful administrator. When you look at his life, you see remnants of Umar ibn al-Khattab in this life. You really see that. He slept for 3 hours a day. He did the administration of the state himself. He oversaw everything. He never missed Salatul Jummah with Jama'ah ever. It is said that he never missed prayers. He always joined the prayers in Takbir of Tahrima, in the first Takbir, in that. Even if he was on a journey, he'd make sure he comes back on Thursday night so that he could attend the Jummah prayer in the Jamia Masjid in Delhi with his people. He is the one who revived the Azan in India. He is the one who propagated the message of Tawheed in India. 3.2 million square kilometers were ruled under him. From Bangladesh to Afghanistan, so that's east to west, and all the way from North India, all the way coming to south, apart from just the bottom small chunk of India was not ruled by him. This was the time, this was the only time that you would say 90 to 95% of India was ruled by the Muslims. This was the only time. So it was a wonderful time. He headed a population of between 100 to 150 million people. And like I said earlier, he is the first to implement Sharia in a non-Muslim majority state. So it was wonderful. It is said that the loss of India is greater than the loss of Spain. Spain was less than 1/10 of India. So many times we cry at the loss of Spain, that Muslims were completely destroyed in Spain. But if you read about the massacre by the British in 1856 of the Muslims in Delhi and surrounding areas, you will realize that that was completely unproportionated massacre, to such an extent that people were hung and they ran out of trunks of trees to hang people from. And this is written by Western historians on this massacre. And if you just did, the massacre of Muslims in 1856 by the British, even on Wikipedia you will read a full page of what happened there. What is his efforts? His grandfather, great-grandfather before that was Akbar. Akbar ruled for 50 years. Akbar came to the throne when he was 12 to 13 years. He was not educated as such, in the sense that he studied sciences, and which the normal Mughal kings would study, mathematics and archery. He was good at archery and swordsmanship. He was a brilliant warrior, Akbar. But somewhere in his life, he thought that what's the best way to unite all the communities in India? This was Akbar's thinking. So he came up with something called Deen-e-Ilahi. He called it Deen-e-Ilahi. And he got a title called Zill-e-Ilahi, that he is the shadow of Allah. That was his title, Zill-e-Ilahi, the shadow of Allah. But although he believed in this faith, and he propagated this faith, that everybody should be under this faith, and he made the Hindus and the Muslims equal, and he forbade the udhiyah, the sacrifice of cows at Eid al-Adha. He removed jizya. He implemented a lot of practices of the Hindus and Muslims, and he just mixed them all together just to accommodate everybody. So this was Akbar's time, and this was continued by his son Jahangir after him. Now, against Akbar stood a wonderful Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi, and he spoke out. But Akbar's deen, even though Akbar ruled for 50 years, and I think it was in the latter part of his life, last 20 years, it did not take precedence amongst the masses of that. But Muslim scholars, the good people like Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi, they could not tolerate that, for example, in the court of Akbar, there was a mandir, that was the Hindu place of worship, because Akbar had married a Hindu woman and she did not convert to Islam. So that was completely going against the tenets of Islam, that a Muslim cannot marry a polytheist. So this was Akbar. Now, Shah Jahan, who was the father of Aurangzeb, was he was good in terms of administration, but he was wasteful. Like many kings before him, whether they were from the time of the Abbasi or times like that, and he wasted a lot of the wealth. Now, for Aurangzeb, the Taj Mahal was a waste of money. It took 7 years to build, 20,000 workers, and Aurangzeb was against this, because he said the nation is being neglected at the building of this. And he saw other extravagances in the kingdom which he did not like. Now, Shah Jahan had 4 sons. He had a son who was ruling over Bengal, Shuja. He had a son who was ruling over Gujarat, Murad Bakhsh. He had Aurangzeb, who was ruling over Deccan. And then he had his crown prince, Dara Shikoh. Dara Shikoh was the favorite of Shah Jahan. He absolutely loved him. But the problem with Dara Shikoh was, he was exactly like Akbar. He spent most of his time sitting amongst the Hindu scholars. He was very influenced and very impressed by the spirituality of the Hindus. He was a bad administrator. He was opposite of Aurangzeb. And I'll tell you about Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb was born in the year 1028 after Hijrah. He lived for 90 years. He spent over 60 years as a ruler. For 8 years to 9 years he ruled Deccan. He was taught horsemanship, swordsmanship, wonderful fighter. He memorized the Quran in 3 years while he was the governor of Deccan. So 3 years he memorized the Quran while he was the governor. He had mastered Tajweed, Sarf, Nahu.
Sorry, where exactly is Deccan?
Deccan is one of the provinces of India.
Which part?
Sort of middle, I would say. I think sort of south of Delhi, I would say. But I'm not 100%, because Shah Jahan had divided India into 4. And each of his sons was ruling one of the major provinces. Arabic language, Persian, fiqh, hadith. Before Shah Jahan, before Aurangzeb became the king, Mughal emperor of the whole of India, he had written or compiled 40 hadith. And whilst he was the ruler of India, he compiled another 40 hadith with commentary. So you can see now his love for hadith and his love for fiqh. Now his love for fiqh is such that when he became the ruler, he got together. Now there are differences of opinion. Some opinions say 50 scholars of the subcontinent, and some say 300 scholars. Between 50 to 300 scholars to compile a book of fiqh, rulings. And this became known as Fatawa Alamgiriya. And in the Arab world, this is known as Fatawa Hindiya. It's very famous. It is found in the libraries of Damascus and Cairo and places like that. When this was completed by the scholars, it was sent to all the provinces and all the Muslim rulers wherever they were in that sense. Now, this was 6 volumes of just do's and don'ts. 6 volumes of do's and don'ts, and they covered everything. Salat, Tahara, Ibadat, Muamalat, the full works. But the commentary of it goes between 30 to 50 volumes. So it was the 6 volumes which were the rulings that were implemented by the state. He would, every day when it started, and I can't remember how many years it took to compile this collection, every evening the scholars would sit with him and they would go over what they had done in the day, and he would personally check the fatwa for references, for accuracy himself. So this is a ruler of 3.2 million square kilometers and a population of 100 to 150 million people. There is a beautiful incident to show his bravery. At the age of 14, he was with his father, and the 4 princes were sitting on a horse, and they were watching the parade of the elephants. And one elephant got slightly wild and came towards the horse of Aurangzeb and swung his tongue at him and hit Aurangzeb, and he fell to the ground. So Aurangzeb got up, took out his sword and confronted the elephant. Actually started to fight the elephant. And obviously man can't defeat the elephant, so the servants came in and managed to separate and etc. So the father was watching this, Shah Jahan, and he said to Aurangzeb, "Why didn't you step back? Why didn't you move back? Why did you fight the elephant?" So Aurangzeb said, Aurangzeb was not born to step back. Aurangzeb was not born for this. So Aurangzeb was a brave man. He was wonderful warrior. Now, Mughals had their rivals, and the Uzbeks were their rivals. So on one occasion, that there is a famous incident of Aurangzeb was sent at the head of an army to fight the Uzbeks. Now it shows you about Aurangzeb. The commander of the Uzbeks was Abdul Aziz Khan. And what happened was, in the middle of the fighting, the the Mughal army got surrounded by the Uzbeks. And Zohar time came. And Aurangzeb at once arranged himself and started to pray Salatul Dhuhr at its time. Because he didn't like to delay his prayer. The Uzbek commander saw this and he took his army back. He said, fighting a man like this is inviting death. That one who fears Allah will not fear anyone else. So seeing his bravery, the Uzbeks took their army back. He was fearless. He feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so after that incident, his father was very impressed by him and appointed him as the ruler of Deccan. Here he came across many princes. Here he came across farmers, ordinary people. He learned a lot while he was a ruler of Deccan. He raised the profile of the empire. He conquered surrounding areas. He improved agriculture in his area, and he became well known for his ability. Now, moving on to the incident of Aurangzeb coming to power now. News spread that the father has fallen ill. And there were big doubts about the competency of the crown prince, Dara Shikoh. So, Dara Shikoh, as I said earlier, was complete opposite of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb wanted to revive Quran and Sunnah. Dara Shikoh wants to revive the way of Akbar. Aurangzeb was a wonderful administrator. Dara Shikoh had no ability, no competency in order to deal with administration. Himself, he said that it is better that I step back and Aurangzeb becomes the ruler of the Mughal Empire. But there were certain people in the family who basically pushed him forward towards becoming standing up for being a crown prince. Anyway, the story goes like this, or the incident is like this, that the family or Shah Jahan was in Agra, where the Taj Mahal is. Just outside Agra, Aurangzeb assembled a force of 30,000, and Dara Shikoh came with a force of 120,000. He was defeated, he was captured, Aurangzeb had captured him, and then he was tried and he was killed for apostasy. So he was killed for apostasy in a court of law. The other two brothers had initially sided with Aurangzeb, but in order to get power, they were also killed. And this is how some of the story goes, that this is how Aurangzeb took his hold of India and then ruled for the next 50 years. He put his father under house arrest for 8 years, and what he did with his father, now his father built the Taj Mahal, and everybody knows about the Taj Mahal. Taj Mahal was built for his wife Mumtaz Mahal. Mahal means palace. Taj means crown. So what he did was, he imprisoned his father in the cellar and made a mirror for his father. So his father could see the Taj Mahal through the mirror. And he left him there. And he said to his father, he said, "Oh my father, you have served the people, now serve Allah, spend the next 8 years like this." Because he disagreed with his father's management and administration of the state. Completely disagreed with it. So he came, he took power in 1069. India was in turmoil. Brothers were fighting each other. There were other Hindus and Sikhs and people like that were rebelling or revolting against the Mughal Empire. The Maharathas and the Maharajas and people like that, they were constantly threatening the Mughal Empire. He took 20 years to consolidate power. So 20 years to consolidate power And for 27 years of his life as a ruler, he fought the Hindus, he fought the Rafida, the deviant sect of the Shias, and he fought all those who tried to destabilize India. Now, if you were to go and Google Aurangzeb, you will find two types of writers. The Hindus absolutely hated him. He is regarded as, in the Hindu scriptures and some Orientalists, he is regarded as the one who destroyed temples. So we want to look at what's the story behind his destruction of temples and why this accusation is made against him. Now, first of all, when he became the ruler, he issued a decree, and the decree was that Islam preserves the religious rights and institutions and places of worship of any faith. Islam does not allow us to destroy churches, to destroy mandars, the temples and things like that. So that is his decree that he issued. So the question is, why did people have this accusation? He destroyed some temples, no doubt about it. But the reason he destroyed those temples, because those were the very temples in which conspiracies and armies and conspirators would gather arms there. So when he knew that arms were being stored somewhere to rebel against the empire, so in order to protect the empire, that's what he did, to defend his state, which anybody would do. Anybody would do. So this is one against him. He was very firm in the matters of justice, to such an extent that he imprisoned his own sons. He imprisoned his own sons. His abilities helped him to be firm and just. As I said, he memorized the Quran before he ascended the throne. He wrote many books. He was a wonderful calligrapher. Some of his calligraphy is still available today. And as I've already said, he compiled 40 sayings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam before becoming the ruler, and 40 while he was a ruler with commentary. But his zuhud, how do we translate zuhud? Zuhud. Zuhud.
Zuhud.
What's the way to translate?
Someone who's abandoned materialism.
Yes, someone who builds a strong link with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and leaves materialism and things like that. So Aurangzeb was a ruler, he was a king. He was rich, he was supposed to be rich and wealthy. There was Mughal Empire in his time was the richest empire of the time. Akbar did not amass the wealth that Aurangzeb had amassed, but he earned his living. So you know that incident of day one, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh becomes the Khalifa, he goes to sell something because he needs to earn his living. Umar ibn Khattab holds him, says, no, you can't do this. We'll give you a stipend from the treasury. Aurangzeb wrote Quran with his own hands. And he knitted hats, the prayer hats. He sold those. That's how he earned his living. He said he preserved the Bayt al-Mal. When he died, and in his will, he wrote, he left 300 rupees, and some narrations say he left 800 rupees from his earnings of selling the Quran, I think. And let me just check, because it's very important to know, subhanallah, when he died. And he had 4.5 rupees left from selling his hats just before he died. So in his will he said, with this 4.5 rupees, buy the kafan, the white sheets for me. And he also left 800 rupees from writing and selling the Quran. That was distributed amongst the poor. So when he died, he had approximately 810 rupees, and that's it. That's all he had.
What's the equivalent of that today?
Right. The equivalent of that today, well, if we go today, there are, I think, 140 rupees to a pound. So you could say 100 pound, maybe. Okay, maybe 100 pounds. But his earnings...
£100 400 years ago is not £100.
No, but still, it's meager, because if you look at what the, look at the Taj Mahal. Yes, one king spent 7 years, 20,000 workers just building the Taj Mahal. So, it's small in that sense. It's small in that sense. On this. So you can see his zuhd, his link with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gave to the poor. He listened to the poor. He had a special time where people could come and meet him and discuss the issues of the state. The Quran he wrote, he sent one copy to Mecca. He had 2 copies specially bound, which cost, now this may give you a good idea, which cost 7,000 rupees in the binding. And he sent one copy to Mecca, and he sent 1 copy to Medina. Now, just before Shah Jahan was arrested and placed under house arrest, Shah Jahan was building a bridge made of silver from his palace in Agra, which you could say the seat of the Mughal home in Agra, to the Taj Mahal. Aurangzeb came, he destroyed the bridge, he had it melted down, he had that metal turned into gold, into coins, and he distributed it amongst the poor. He said, this is extravagance. This is waste of the wealth of the nation. He loved poetry. When he became a ruler, he abandoned poetry completely. Mughal children were taught music. Music was a big thing in India at that time. He completely detested it and hated it when he became the king. He expelled all the musicians. He had all the musical instruments destroyed in his land, and musical women and dancing girls were expelled. So one incident is that he was riding on his horse, and he saw a group of people lamenting and crying and carrying a coffin. So he said, he stopped them and he said, where are you going? Whose coffin is this? Whose janazah is this? And they said, this is the coffin of music. So he said, lift the shroud from the top. So they lifted it, and it was all the musical instruments. These were musicians who were protesting. So he said, good. He said, bury this well, and bury it deeply, because this shaitan rises very quickly. This evil rises very quickly. Now, people today love to give justification of music because, it helps me to relax, and, all these things. I mean, I'm sorry to say this here, and someone will say, oh, there are 300 opinions on music, etc. Whatever, but you can see his zuhd. You can see what he was serious about, what he wanted. He was himself taught the Hanafi madhab. And in the Hanafi madhab, musical instruments are completely forbidden. So maybe that's where he got this when he became the king. Now, he slept for 3 hours only. So he ate only 2 meals. One meal was taken at around 10 o'clock in the morning, and another meal was taken at 6 o'clock in the evening. So these are only 2 meals he ate at that time. He appointed a qadi in every town and village. His book, Fatawa Hindiya, is still one of the main reference points for the Hanafis. They still see it as one of the major books of fiqh, which is used for him. Every Wednesday, people would come to him and they would complain to him, and he would meet them at the Ministry of Justice, and he would solve their problems himself. So he would listen to what they had. His daily schedule, look at his daily schedule. He offered Fajr at the Jamia Masjid in Delhi. He recited Quran. He would go to, they call it Dawlat Khana, which was the governmental office to deal with the governmental affairs. He'd have lunch just before 10 o'clock. He'd sleep for 1 hour before Zohar prayer, and he would pray Zohar, and then he would deal with the affairs of the state up until Asr time. He would pray Asr, he would pray Maghrib, he would pray Isha, all in the masjid amongst the people. He heard once that one of the rulers of Bengal had a special chair made for him, so he would sit amongst above the people. He wrote to him, and this is why I say some reminiscence of Umar ibn Khattab. He wrote to him, he said, destroy that and sit with the people. Sit with the people. Okay? So this was, subhanAllah, this was him. He fasted 3 days weekly. He fasted on a Monday, he fasted on a Thursday, he fasted on a Friday. He did all the other fasts of Ashura, of Yawm al-Arafat. He prayed Tahajjud, and at times he would lead Taraweeh prayer. He would lead Salat Taraweeh himself. He valued the opinion of learned men, and he loved sitting amongst them in that sense. Now, this thing about he implemented jizya. Now, jizya is a big problem for people. So whenever we talk about jizya, it's a big problem. Before Aurangzeb, there were 80 taxes that were levied on the citizens of India. He removed them all. This brought in 3 million rupees annually. So 3 million rupees was brought into the state annually from 80 different kinds of taxes. He abolished all 80. He imposed jizya, which was imposed by Babur when he first came, and then it was abolished by Akbar. Wine and gambling was allowed in the time of Akbar, he abolished it. Aurangzeb abolished it. He had to build a naval fleet. Now, one thing that could possibly go against him is the Portuguese attacked the Muslim India once. They had a large fleet, and they had the help of Spaniards. So they occupied some parts of Bengal, and their naval fleet was quite invincible. He sought help from the British and allowed them to stay in Calcutta. So this is one of the things some people say that this is how the British came to India, and after much time they conquered it. So just to summarize, and then I'll finish. Now, one of the greatest accolades for me when it comes to Aurangzeb is that Sheikh Ali Tantawi has a book called Rijal Min al-Tarikh. In that he says Aurangzeb was the 6th rightly guided Khalifa. He says after Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, and that's a profound statement. That's a major statement. That look, between Umar ibn Abdul Aziz we had some wonderful people. We had Nuruddin Zangi. People of that caliber. We had some wonderful rulers in India before that, when the Delhi Sultanate was established. We had some wonderful rulers in the Ottomans, amongst the Ottomans as well. But he writes this, and he says that Aurangzeb was the 6th rightly guided Khalif. He was just, he was righteous, he was a mujahid, and I would say he was a mujaddid. He was a reviver. MashaAllah, he loved the Quran, he loved Hadith, and I've said, how many rulers can memorize the Quran whilst they are rulers? So when he was a ruler, governor of Deccan, in 3 years he memorized the Quran. Not only that, he had perfected recitation, tajweed, and things like that. Unfortunately, when he passed away, his son Bahadur Shah ascended the throne. For about 5 years after him, they held the empire, but weaknesses of the rulers and the strengthening of the British with that, then you can see that brings the downfall of the empire. But the one thing he has left, if you want to look at a monument that he built the great Badshai Masjid in Lahore, which he built in 1673. Wonderful masjid. I've only been there once, but if you stand in the courtyard, it has a unique feeling which is very difficult to describe. But that's the only thing he built. He strengthened the masajid that were in the empire. He gave wazifas, the allowance to students. He encouraged students to study, gave them allowances. He increased the salaries of teachers because he wanted knowledge to be well prevalent amongst the Muslims. So this is a quick summary of this great ruler. May Allah have mercy on him. Aurangzeb, Muhyiddin. Some scholars called him because he was a reviver or the preserver of this deen. So may Allah forgive me if I have said anything wrong. Jazakumullah khairan.
Jazakallah, Dr. Iftikhar. Fascinating snippet into the life of Sultan Aurangzeb, and I remember once one of the brothers, he was born in Pakistan, he came to this country, lived here, and what he learnt here was he learnt Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, all fictitious heroes, not real people. And he said, is it possible that because we come from a culture in which we have people like Aurangzeb, we have people like Ibn Khattab, we have Muhammad al-Fatih. I mean, we can keep going on and on with all these names, and amazing personalities from which we can learn so much, and people that we can truly look up to. Real superheroes, real life superheroes that had massive impacts on the societies that they lived in, to a point, subhanAllah, that he was called Ibrahim alayhi salam of his time. So Jazakallah khair, Dr. Iftikhar. If there's any questions, inshallah, quickly.
Let me say a couple more things which I missed out. A French man who served the courts of Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb for 12 years. He said, I saw him fasting completely in the summer months, and his iftar was a simple bread made of corn and other things that people have said. He did wonderful work for travelers. So this journey from Lahore to Kabul, a very difficult journey. He built service stations, he built marketplaces, he built masajid, he dug wells, he built caravans, orphanages, elderly homes, he built homes for disabled people. So you could see, what sort of thinking that. There was another wonderful ruler called Sher Shah Suri in India as well, who did the same thing. So you may have heard of this GT road. It's called the Grand Trunk Road. It's a wonderful road. It goes from Karachi all the way up to Peshawar and going into Kabul, I think. So along there, Sher Shah Suri built service stations because they wanted to encourage trade, because they brought in revenues. So Alamgir ensured that people were living comfortably in that sense.
Right, any questions, inshallah, or comments? Sister back in there.
Can I just ask, I just want to ask the main reason why Muslims avoid music, because I haven't really asked that question before.
Stad, you want to answer that? For me, personally, I take the opinion of one of our teachers in Pakistan, Dr. Anis Ahmad, who said, people do differ, but it's addictive. And it takes you away from this link with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it comes back to haunt you whilst you're standing in your prayers and things like that. So he said, because of this addiction, I don't agree with it. There are hadith which people quote, and Shaykh Qaradawi in his book Al-Halal wal-Haram fil Islam, he's discussed the issue. You can read on that. But, when it comes to fiqh, Ustad Shihab is much more, can give an opinion on this.
I think it makes people out of focus, especially the youngsters. Like, imagine, we like people to be a little bit serious. We want people to be focused. I think, especially with nowadays, like, if some ulama would allow music, they would say that that music and singing is allowed, and it depends on what you are saying. Is the lyrics depends what you're saying. Today, for example, if I go through the list of all these musicians and things and what they say, And where have we reached now? Just to switch on in the morning your laptop and see what the news on AOL or the or Daily Mail or the Huffington Post, and when they report on musicians and when they report on singers and when they report on these people, you could see that it's been degraded like anything. Music is like a spiral. You know when to start, but you do not know where it ends. And it takes your concentration completely off the life and put you somewhere else. It takes, subhanAllah, and imagine, like, you know, it's very difficult to mix music with, we are Muslims and we revere Al-Quran, Al-Quran Al-Kareem. It completely, subhanAllah, takes Al-Quran from your heart. It's very difficult to mix the two together. I mean, I see, when I take my children in the morning to school, immediately when you see the children standing on the bus stop, immediately they take out their mobile phone and they put this hands-free kit and they start listening to music. And from the time they listen to music, from the time they board the bus to the time they are in classroom, they are listening to music. And this music is, subhanAllah, it's unbelievable. What is this, subhanAllah? It's unbelievable. On top of the fact that so much mess and wreckage and roughage goes into the lyrics. I do not want to go to the, to the details, but it's, I mean, it's absolutely. There is a hadith which is, I don't think it's a sahih, maybe it's not hadith sahih, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the shaitan, he purged him from Jannah. He purged him, he kicked him out of Jannah. And he said, you go and your method in life is to misguide people. And then the shaitan asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what is my way? He said, your way is going to be music. Okay? It's going to be whispering and music. Your whispering and music. The shaitan's Quran is music. This is not to talk about the hadiths and the deleels and the things, but I live with the youth and I see what's going on, and I switch on my laptop in the morning and I see what's going on with all these. I do not want to mention the names and the things, and so many English women, English mothers are complaining because their kids are completely taken out of reality by this thing. But I missed my question now to Dr.
Your question.
Your question, inshallah, this time, inshallah.
Now, Aurangzeb is the son of Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan is, because I am so fascinated by Agra and by Taj Mahal, and I would love to go there, and Mawlana Qazi Saab, from Saddam Hussein Mosque in Aston, he goes on every year, and I said, please take me with you. He says, I go there every year. Now, Shah Jahan is the one who built.
Yes, for his wife, Mumtaz Mahal.
Now, Shah Jahan is the son of who?
Jahangir.
Huh?
Jahangir.
Jahangir, not Alamgir, Jahangir.
Jahangir.
No,
Jahangir means
who?
the ruler of.
Yes.
Jahangir's real name was Salim.
Okay.
So Jahangir means the.
Now, who's Alamgir?
Alamgir is Aurangzeb's title.
Alamgir is Aurangzeb.
Aurangzeb's title is
the
Alamgir.
conqueror of the world.
Yes.
Now, Shah Jahan, his dad was?
Jahangir, and Jahangir is the son of Akbar.
Akbar, who's the British are fascinated by Akbar because of his wife.
And Akbar is the son of Humayun, who is the son of Babur.
Babur, who came in from
and
the.
Babur is the founder
of
the
the
Mughal
Mughal
dynasty
Empire.
in India.
Okay.
Yes, came through Kabul.
Okay.
He liked the.
So Babur comes from Kabul.
No, he came from.
Central Asia.
I think from Tashkent.
From Central Asia.
Yes,
to Kabul.
Yeah, he loved Kabul
Okay.
because he felt very at ease at Kabul.
Okay.
So he came to Kabul and they told him there is something better. conquer India.
Okay.
So he conquered India.
Yeah, that will make the Afghans too happy to hear that.
No, they love him. They love him.
Yeah, but they won't love the fact that, that India is better than Afghanistan. Any more questions? Qasim?
Mughal Azam is
Akbar.
Akbar.
It's an Indian film made in 1975.
Yeah.
It's an amazing film because it was made in black and white.
This is Babur, huh?
No, this is Akbar.
Akbar.
Yes.
Okay.
It was made in...
Akbar is Aurangzeb's granddad.
Akbar
Great-granddad.
is... Yes, great-granddad. 1, 2, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Mughal-e-Azam was made... It started off as a black and white movie and it ended up as a color movie. Because by that time they had discovered color.
How many years?
1975, I think.
Okay.
My father told me this because he watched it. So it's black. Half of it is black and white. The other half is Arabic. It's color.
It's colour.
A lot of it is pictures.
And Sheikh Al-Tantawi has got a book.
Yes.
I know this book.
Rijal Minatar.
Yeah, I know his book very well.
In there he's mentioned it. And the thing, one of the things with Mughals, there's some misrepresentation because whenever the Indians or the Pakistanis make a drama or a film about them, they love to put a love story in there.
Of course, yeah, because
So,
it appeals
because
to the,
otherwise people aren't going to watch it.
appeals to the,
So there are
I
some
think the best person who wrote about these historical characters, the best person who wrote about these historical... I was reading about a very important person called Hamidu. Hamidu is somebody to mock in Egypt, for example. But actually, Hamidu was an Algerian seaman who imposed sea tax on the American at the time of Jefferson. But they mock him to degrade him. But he actually brought these people to their knees. And nobody would enter that strait between Portugal and between Algeria without paying that tax. There's so many amazing historical characters that we know very, very little about. But subhanAllah, I found that one of the best people who write about these things is Dr. Serjani.
Yes.
He's unfortunately, it is not in English, but he's amazing. And the people who he writes about, very authenticated, because he's a very modern man.
Yes.
And he's a very educated man. And he's not somebody who's not a historian, but he's a doctor.
I follow him on Twitter.
Yeah. He's an amazing man, mashallah, tabarakallah. And his, but on history, huh?
Yes,
not on anything
yes,
else.
yes,
on history, yes, he's amazing.
He's amazing.
I'm quite sure that he has got something. I'll go and research. I'm quite sure that he's got something on...
There is a sheikh from Saudi, Sheikh Muhammad Musa Sharif.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He's graduate.
He's
so
a
some
historian.
of it, I listened to
He's
his talk as
he's
well.
historian, yeah.
And he's done, I think, 50 characters from the Islamic world only. So he's done Maududi.
In English?
No, it's Arabic, but very well subtitled.
Okay.
Subtitled as well. So he's done Abu Hassan Ali Nadwi, he's done Aurangzeb, he's done all the main, he's done the four.
I know him very well.
And he's very good, Masha. He's really
well.
amazing.
I know him very
I
well.
think he's a graduate of Al-Qura.
Amazing man.
Jazakallah khair, inshallah, we'll wrap up there, inshallah. Fascinating discussion, evolved from the talk, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Iftikhar, and for Sheikh Shahab's input, bad input. Inshallah, we're going to break up. We're going to be adhan in the next 2-3 minutes, inshallah. So please, if you haven't done so already, like our Facebook page, MABFriday, and subscribe to our
What
YouTube
are we doing next time?
page. Next time, we're doing the third and final part of the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ by Sheikh Shihab. At 7:30 it will start, inshallah. 7:30, inshallah. Not after Maghrib. So wait for Maghrib. What's left? No. This is from Ma'rakat al-Khandaq all the way to Fath Makkah and the passing of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, inshallah. Subscribe to YouTube, MABFridays, plural. Like our page on Facebook, MABFriday, singular. وجزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
We need to organize a bike ride to Adran.